we think that you need to have an initial $50 to $100 billion investment in infrastructure. So we need to build the transmission lines from the windiest parts of the United States to the cities and the factories. We need to modernize the grid so it can more efficiently use the clean energy sources that we have. Right now we spend about less than $4 billion on energy R&D. That's less than a single biotechnology firm spends on its R&D. Amgen spends on its R&D every year. We spend about $80 billion a year on R&D for the Defense Department. So we just spend basically nothing on energy R&D. That number needs to at least triple in terms of the R&D. But then there's something else that's really important here, which is that innovation doesn't just happen in laboratories. It actually happens in the real world, where you can get feedback from how consumers and engineers are using and installing these new technologies. So what we're arguing for is that we also spend $30 billion a year on deployment or procurement. That's just a little bit of jargon to say we should actually be doing large contracts with wind energy companies, solar companies, geothermal, other companies that are pioneering these clean energy sources. And those contracts, again, would be done in a way so that we could support the innovation that private companies are so good at doing when they're incentivized to do it, and also allow for some transparency so that we actually own some of these, some equity in these companies. So we're thinking,
and we, you mean by the federal government?
The taxpayers. You know, we're going to make these investments. We should get some of the upside, some return on those investments, enough to also reward private firms to do the right thing. So I think that in terms of numbers, I think we got to spend at least 50 to 100 billion upfront as an infrastructure investment. But then we need to spend at least $50 billion a year, not just for 10 years, but I think something more like 20 or 30 years to to procure these new technologies, to invest in these new companies. I think if we do that, and if Europe comes in with its 50 billion a year, maybe Japan and Canada can come in with 10 billion a year, we're talking about a global fund of somewhere around 120 billion dollars a year that will be able to start procuring these technologies. And I think we should do it in a global way. It's not just American firms, it's also Chinese firms, Indian firms. What we get out of it is a new manufacturing sector, and we get a win-win with China and India. But I think we need to be thinking about it on that scale. And unfortunately, I think our politicians are still thinking about this in a kind of 1980s or 1990s scale before we were really in a serious crisis.